What's going on, folks? Hope you're having a good Friday, and welcome back to the Patch Notes Breakdown. Looks like the changes came early this month, and we might be getting at least one more patch before this month is through. This one came in as part 1 of the June Alpha update. As they said before, they're done with the major Alpha updates for now. These ones are going to focus primarily on the bug fixes and polish. But we've actually got a little bit more than just that to talk about. To start with, they say that this patch fixes over 1,209 bugs. That's a little insane. But also, some good news for companies, the member size limit has been increased from 50 to 100. Coupled with the fact that last video we talked about the possibility of multi-company alliances being brought up in the conversation I had with them, it seems like they're opening things up to bigger communities. And hopefully this ends up extending to the faction control points and other aspects too. Would still love to see that 25 player maximum be increased or lifted entirely. They've also added some new lore pages to each of the starting zones and given us access to bigger revelations about that zone's constable. And these are the NPCs that'll help you during your startup quest lines and who you can accept town projects from. For the progression changes, starts off with them talking about how in the May update, they introduced some new ways of advancement, such as allowing us to get experience through trade skills, territory standing levels, or even discovering points of interest in lore pages. And as a result, players were leveling much faster than the content intended, so they'd made some changes across the board to balance this. First thing they did is increase the XP we get from discovering lore pages, which does sound really good to me. Base experience increased from 25 to 40, and it dynamically increases by 10 for every 10 notes discovered. They then doubled the experience gains from discovering points of interest, but also increased the amount of experience required to level by 40% for all levels after 7. They give an explanation below where they do say that us players in the alpha were leveling much faster than they expected. So this change is to better align the progression with the content of this game. And yeah, all things considered, without revealing anything, this is definitely a change that was warranted this time around. Not sure about nerfing it that much, but I still hope they're considering adding some new leveling methods. Especially with the nerfs that this patch brings to the corrupted breaches, the game itself could really benefit off of having more dynamic event-based content in the open world. Maybe even ones tied directly to PvP alongside more incentive for players that want to opt in. Next change is, as we said, they reduced the experience of corrupted breaches by 10 to 20% based on the level of the breach. They also decreased the spawn speed from 15 minutes to 30 minutes for the minor ones, and 30 minutes to 60 minutes for the major. Then we have a reduction in faction mission experience gain, and this was done to accommodate the changes made to the mission structure. This included a 20% reduction for the PvP missions specifically, but since they now have the daily bonuses on the first 3 faction missions we do, and they're making changes to make them faster, this probably won't be as big of a deal as the breaches. The main thing they're doing here is trying not to make progression too fast to where we cap out in a week, and then by the time a month rolls around, we've already done all the content. But that's also why I hope they have more progression methods and features waiting in the wing for development, because things like this only slightly delay the inevitable, but can also diminish that fun factor if things get nerfed too far. Next thing is now arenas will require one party member to have a tuning orb for entry. So these orbs can be given during an initial quest line to complete the arena, and then afterwards they can be crafted with materials found around a turnip. Now these are also crafted at the stone cutting bench like the expedition ones are. The thing is, I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this one. These tuning orbs seem like they're a way to try to elevate the stone cutting profession, because other than cutting gems, there wasn't really a whole lot of reasons to pursue this one outside of furniture. So I like that those kinds of crafters are now going to be in high demand, and because there's a quest line tied to these, that guarantees you, and technically your party if you have 5 people, 5 runs right off the bat instead of having to farm for hours on mobs to maybe or maybe not get one of these. But I don't know yet. I think we'll have to see this play out to know for sure. For the crafting missions that got removed from faction missions, those have been added to the town projects instead, which does make more sense because those were normally crafting and gathering related anyway. Some minor changes right below this, bringing us to a great change for anyone that plans to sell or place buy orders on the trading post. They raised the total cap of active buy and sell orders up to 100 per character, previously being set at 50. And for the last set of progression changes, we've got some minor ones affecting the list of available territory standing bonuses when we gain the levels, on top of also tweaking the amount of furnishing points granted by furnishing standing bonus, which I believe is referring to how your levels in territory standing should affect the total house points for your character. Then for the loot and gear side, we've got ourselves a juicy section. Starting off with the minor change for gray gear no longer being bind on equip, so you don't have to deal with the pop-up each time. And they said that they added over 50 new armor sets that can be obtained through various game activities. Really awesome to see us already getting this, and don't forget about the Ebon Rock armor I told you about. I'm so ready for that one to show up on the scene. And along with this, they updated visuals, stats, and perks for many of the unique weapons and armor sets found throughout the following modes: Invasions, Wars, Corrupted Breaches, Outpost Rush, or the Expeditions, the Arenas, and many of the elite points of interest. They've also added over 27 new trinket rewards for the Wars, Corrupted Breaches, Invasions, and Outpost Rush. Made some minor changes to the color schemes of weapons found throughout the game, and they added 2 trade skill apparels that can be discovered throughout a turnip. And these sound like the crafting and gathering gear sets, but it sounds like they work globally. So you have one set for all the crafting trade skills and another for all the gathering, which I have to admit, if that is the case, it would make things much easier, because I was already trying to plan in my head how I would possibly keep track of multiple sets of gear for both combat and literally every single crafting and gathering profession. And if any of you have seen how well I handle organization, it would have been a complete disaster. And skipping down past these last changes, for the crafting section, we actually have 2 very interesting ones I wanted to point out. First one is jewel crafting now has trinkets with embroidered gems that cannot be changed. So now there's a separate listing for each of the gems so you know exactly what you're getting from the very beginning. But then it talks about how they've added crafting recipes for carnelian and amber trinkets. Carnelian being the gem that's mainly tied to allowing certain abilities to taunt creatures. It does have other uses too, but amber, this one I didn't fully remember being a thing. But basically what this one is, if you remember how sometimes I've mentioned, most recently in the Ultimate Weapons Guide video, how you could actually play as a battle mage past just having like a fire staff and a rapier, since rapier scales off intelligence 2 now. The gems have had this effect for a while, but now in the tooltips it even shows you how the elements like fire and void will translate the weapon damage into elemental damage, but it can also stack off intelligence as well. Well, to my surprise, Amber, for those of you that like the idea of healing, does the very same thing but with the focus attribute instead. So ladies and gentlemen, Paladin builds are indeed a thing right now. In my mind, it won't be fully complete until we get the one-handed mace or like a flail weapon, but this is a thing. So I highly encourage you to spread the word to anyone that still doesn't know, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of builds come out of this. And then we're brought down to the UX and UI changes. The main menu, as you can see, has got a full-on overhaul. So previously we were working with a server selection screen like this, and then this is the final product. So we've got some links and showcases for people to make use of on the left side. They also say during these notes that they plan to eventually deliver streaming videos through these tiles, but also in the very top right, I'd like to draw your attention to this specific portion. For those of you that have been following the game for a while, you might remember a long time ago that there was an article interview done where Amazon teased multiple features of Twitch integration. Streamer armies, streamer spotlights. In other articles we've seen Twitch drops get mentioned, but we haven't seen nearly any mention of it at all since then. Well, I'm 99.9% sure that's exactly what this is, which is a good sign because that means they're truly putting the finishing touches on the game, and it's just about done baking in the oven. Very next thing is we see the revamped character menu. They say the world list is being replaced with our character slots, which we have 2 per region. And when I initially looked at this, it seemed like we were getting an extra character slot. But they also said below this that we now only need to choose a world when initially creating our characters. So it sounds like we might still only have 1 per server, but we'll have to see to know for sure. Speaking of that, I'm really hoping they release the server names before beta, because it'd be really good if we can plan all that out like we did during the preview, especially for communities and groups of friends. And also, speaking of character creation, jumping below we have ourselves the new version of the character creation menu. They say that we have some new faces, new hairstyles, facial hair, eye color, skin features, scars, and tattoos. They even show some examples in these screenshots, and just to show a comparison, this is the old version of our character creator right here, and now we have the new version with more options. Always a good thing to see. They're definitely listening to player feedback on the customization side, and I'm really excited to see what comes next. And for the gameplay UI polish, they've adjusted the combat interface to provide more information in moment-to-moment gameplay. Like they've added icons for floating damage to showcase multiple aspects of the damage output, giving us indicators and colors to show if an attack has improved or reduced effectiveness against the target. And speaking of which, if you guys don't know, the mobs do have strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the elemental and different damage types. Like the dryads are weak to fire damage, corrupted are weak to empowered, but strong versus the void since they are closely related. And the ancients and lost have things like that too, but we'll talk about that more in the future. Status effects now also generate floating text and an icon to clearly indicate what's going on. So like if you apply rend or weakness, or a bleed gets put onto you, that kind of thing. And status effect icons are now being placed above the enemy's name instead of how it was before. Bringing us down to the last changes, we've got some miscellaneous other UX changes. These ones focus on things like the tooltips and die screens, unique icons for party members with different options for colorblind accessibility, the storage shed polish, and in addition for promoting stealth gameplay in the open world. And finally, we've got the combat and balance changes, which these ones might just be some of the biggest changes in the entire post. Starting off with the default control scheme, first thing is the dodge is now bound to shift by default, jumping is bound to space. So no longer do we have to start sprinting to jump, we can just do this automatically. And sprinting is just something that happens all the time now, and it seems like it doesn't drain your stamina. They're doing this as a quality of life change, but just in my head, I feel like this is going to take some getting used to. Me personally, I'm probably going to rebind dodging back to spacebar, and then I'll put jump on something else, because at this point with the game, I'm way more comfortable with that kind of control scheme. So now when you enter combat, like you get hit or you hit somebody else, you cannot start sprinting for at least 1.5 seconds if it's your hitting, or 2 seconds if you're being hit. They made this change to help reduce the runaway game that's been occurring in PvP, and to help put melee players on a level playing field. This is something that's been an issue for a long time, especially when the life staff had access to Siphon. But I must admit that I did not expect them to do anything like this specifically. Now I'm hoping that this works out for players on all sides and isn't too bad, but as somebody who plays melee primarily in this game, I gotta be honest, I'm kinda looking forward to this. And I gotta let you mages and range players know, you better tighten up your booties because we're coming for you. But on a serious note though, I am kinda worried about the player versus environment side of things, especially since we don't have the stagger anymore. It'll be tough for melee, but for ranged, it might be way tougher with this change, depending on the mob. Climbing is still going to be possible with the jump command, and for movement, they did remove the barrel roll after sprint jumping unless a player is landing from an elevated height, which I hope that still triggers pretty often because I actually like doing that. Makes me feel like I'm doing parkour. And skipping down past the minor changes, we have the next big part which affects those of us that usually play tanks. So block breaking has been updated to give us more of a disadvantage. Basically, whenever our block would break beforehand, we would automatically regenerate back to full stamina. So in many cases, it was beneficial to let enemies break your block, but now this is what they did. After the block breaks, we cannot dodge or block for a total of 3 seconds. Stamina will now reset to full only after 3 seconds instead of 1.5. Players cannot block at 0 stamina. Stamina will not regenerate while blocking. After we release a block, there is a 1 second delay before it starts to regenerate. It will regenerate while attacking, and default stamina regeneration has been reduced from 33 per second to 20 per second. After that, we got some minor changes related to Death's Door. That's the state you go into when your health goes to 0 and you're not fully dead. We've also got some minor changes to when we have our weapons unequipped and when we're proned. And then we come down to the balance changes. These are some pretty minor changes across the board, except mainly for the fire staff. The fireball spell can now be blocked with the shield. Incinerate has had the stagger removed, and the passive called Prophet of a Fire God has been nerfed from 35% critical damage down to 20%. Other than that, we've got some adjustments on both the Great Axe and Warhammer heavy attacks, both of which will now further direct us towards the target, so hopefully that helps a bit with the control of these weapons. But I do think the basic attacks are the ones that need help much more than the heavies. And also Musket got an interesting change where the Trapper Ultimate has been completely redesigned. So now it grants a 40% base damage increase on targets that have any status effects applied by the Trapper skill tree. So like the traps themselves, or the sticky bomb when you have the sticky slow passive. But that's officially all we've got for this part 1 for the June patch notes. Very interested to see what the next part might entail, but in the meantime, as always, let me know what you think about these changes. Have a wonderful night or day, and farewell.